Well, let me start with a confession, and I'll move through my slides. I promise you it's cruel and unusual to have someone listen to me after you've eaten, so I apologize for that. But I'm from Houston, Texas, so I am a native Texan. I work in Florida. Normally I start the confession in Florida. I'm from Texas, so, and they just kind of look at me. So being from Texas, you know, you're very blunt. Don't have a lot of time to kind of smooth things over and be politically correct. So I'm gonna apologize up front. Get that out the way. So I'm here to talk to you about school safety planning. I've had just a remarkable experience in Palm Beach County schools in Florida. Let me tell you a little bit about our school district. We're the 10th largest district in the nation. Previously, I've been in Houston ISD, Dallas ISD, Spring Branch ISD, and now I'm in Florida, Palm Beach County. So some people could say I have an issue with committing, I don't know. But wonderful district, wonderful climate. We have 187 schools. And varied combinations, of course, elementary, middle school, high school. We have a lot of choice schools, as well as adult community schools, which is really huge in our particular neck of the woods. 197,000 students, 23,000 employees. Our county is one of the biggest in Florida. We cover 2,300 square miles, nearly double the size of Rhode Island. So I don't know if anybody's from Rhode Island. I only know Texas, so to me it seems kind of small. But I'll move on. And here's another tidbit. We have the youngest superintendent, I think in the country right now. He's 41 years old. And he's the first black superintendent, we call him number 26, for the school district of Palm Beach County. Remarkable young man. If you ever get a chance to meet him, you won't miss him. He's about 6'4", and he's a really big guy. So if you ever come in contact with him, please speak to him and tell him I sent you. Okay. Pre-Marjory Stoneman Douglas tragedy. So this is something that happened to us in Florida. Marjory Stoneman Douglas is in Broward County. It borders Palm Beach County. Prior to that, we had 155 sworn officers. We have our own police department, fully certified police department. And this is kind of a look of, you know, kind of how we existed before Marjory Stoneman Douglas. We had an officer assigned to every 4 elementary schools. So we didn't, you know, have an officer at every school. And then we had a detective bureau training division, K9 units, motorcycle units. We had motorcycle cops, and a radio shop. So this is how we looked prior to Marjory Stoneman Douglas. February the 14th, 2018, I'll never forget it. We were all executive team, our board, we were in a board meeting. And we started getting messages on our phones, Google Alerts, if you're familiar with that. It changed how we saw our schools. It changed how we saw our roles in doing our job. Our Florida legislature enacted a bill like overnight. Literally, it seemed like it happened overnight. Senate Bill 7026. And it just changed everyone in the state of Florida. It changed our lives. Basically, it mandated that we had to have some type of security officer in every school. It mandated that we had to do certain things for mental health and so forth. So this is in February. We start school in August. We have our own police department, but as you saw, we had 155 officers. Those officers were a combination of detectives and so forth. So they were administrative type people, and then we had some in the schools. From that, we had to add 75 sworn officers. We're going from 151 to 226, and then you have to have all the infrastructure, like cars and equipment and all of that. Quite honestly, none of the school districts in Florida we were not prepared for that. My greatest worry was executing a $1.3 billion bond. So it just totally changed the way we thought about our jobs and how we could execute it. So immediately, we had to align ourselves to this new requirement. Some people wanted to wait it out and see if the Senate made a mistake and they were going to get through it. Because when it first came out, there was no funding attached to it. So that was a huge impact on our operational budget, if you can imagine. We immediately began training officers. Also, our local sheriff's department, we're the second largest law enforcement department in our county, the school police. And so our sheriff's office, they felt like they could do a better job at, providing security for our schools. And so we had that kind of conversation in public. If you can Google it, read the newspaper about it. And we cleaned out our whole administrative office and sent them to schools. It was just one of the most unbelievable experiences I've ever gone through. We had to negotiate overnight, literally overnight, 25 separate local law enforcement agreements. Basically, I went to our municipalities. We have the chiefs meeting, the chief of the chief, and then there's a chief of the chief, so the head chief in the county. I crashed their meeting. And I went to them and I said, hey, we need help. It was kind of like this. We need help. We're not going to turn our schools over to the sheriff's department. We need your help. And every one of them stood up and said, I got you. So we had overnight 25 local municipalities. We got 10 deputies from our sheriff's department. That was their contribution. They gave us 10 deputies. And so that was a significant emotional event for our county. We were bombarded, and I don't know if any of you have gone through something like this. God, I hope you never have to. We were bombarded with scared parents, scared community members. It was like a hysteria that I had never seen before, and I spent quite a few years in the Army. And it was like, how do you tell parents that they can bring their kids to school and have them feel fully confident that you're going to take care of them? From when they go to the bus stop to when they get on the bus stop or get on the bus to when they're delivered at home till they walk into their door at home. And so it was a significant emotional event for us. Also, we weren't paying our officers very much, so it was hard recruiting. When you have a city like Boca Raton down the street that's really top of the salaries in Florida, it's very difficult to recruit people. So we had to kind of change how we did business. One of the things we did, which was just really brilliant on our part, was we called in the Council of the Great City Schools to come in and evaluate our police department. Because during this time, we also had this thing called a grand jury that convened to talk about school security, which was unprecedented, never happened before. So we had all these moving parts going on at the same time. The council came in and gave us a really good look, a very detailed look at our police department. We had already made the decision, I think, that we had to go a different direction in the police chief. So it was major decisions that were happening at lightning speed. Because the reality was we did not want to go home at night, look ourselves in the mirror and say we didn't do everything we could to keep our kids safe. It was personal. We had teachers that had kids in Stoneman Douglas, spouses in Stoneman Douglas, so it was really a tremendous amount of emotion that was going at that time, as you can imagine. And God bless Superintendent Runcie in Broward County. He has done a remarkable job in trying to keep that district together and keep them focused on education. And again, you can read the newspaper. A lot of stuff has gone on about that and written about it. But until you actually experience it, God forbid you ever do, it's what keeps you up at night. So in terms of our police department, we had to, look at how we could attract new officers. One of the things, we had just a very antiquated hiring process, so we had to change that. There were so many steps in the process that we had to change. It's mind-boggling, but the end result was we have to have an officer in every school. And then mental health had to be addressed. That was part of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Act, where we just don't have the right support for our children that are going through crises. Also, in terms of security, building, hardening the building, we had started that process with Sandy Hook, but the way we evaluated our schools and all that kind of stuff, it was at a snail's pace, so we had to kind of change that. We're receiving an additional 6.7 from our state government a grant to help us do a lot of this work. Also, November the 6th, we were able to pass, with the help of our wonderful community, a tax referendum that really focused on security, mental health, and then also with that was about 650 teachers that we funded through this action, through the referendum, for fine arts programs. And so just a complete different way of how we ran our district, quite honestly. Security enhancement, evaluation, and implementation process. So the way our process works, we have a site assessment by our police department. We go through procurement and design through our facilities construction department. Implementation, actually doing the work, the physical work, through our facilities department. And then the police department, our school police department, is responsible for testing, activation of the systems, and programming. Key elements of school safety: prevention, communication, intervention, crisis response, diversion, reunification, safety and security, and recovery. So when you look at some of these steps, they seem simple, but they're not. A district our size, one of the things, if something happens, how do you get the message out to the parents in a consistent way? How do you get the right message out? Because there's a lot of misinformation when these kind of situations happen. And it just takes forever to even try to pull some of that stuff back. People will believe what they believe. And so we have a tremendously talented chief of communications, as well as she's dual-slotted chief of staff. And so she helps us with this and they have a plan that is, I had like 26 slides and was told that I needed to cut it down. So this is the scaled back version of it. Teaming up to protect our schools, continuity of operation plans. So when you have so many different police forces in your schools, you have to understand who's in charge, how do they communicate, what happens if something happens to a student. We have this thing called the Baker Act, where if a person is experiencing a mental crisis or whatever, then they Baker Act them and they take them to a mental health facility. And this is for students as well as adults. So, you have all these moving parts. Integrated emergency response plans, sharing of information and resources, being able to communicate with our supporting law enforcement agencies, as well as municipalities, the police chiefs, the mayors, the city attorneys, the city managers. As I said before, the sheriff's department covers 10 schools. And we have 2 cities without volunteers to provide support at schools in other jurisdictions. So we have cities that are not even in our jurisdiction that stepped up to help us. And then also, our department continues to hire. As I said before, we changed the hiring process to expedite it. Doesn't mean that we reduce the quality. The quality is still the same, the process is still the same. But we had a lot of antiquated things we were doing that were outdated. So we hired more than 40 new officers between July 2nd and October 2018, and we continue to hire. As we hire, we will replace those officers or replace the municipal officers with our officers, and that is on track to happen. Also, we're also working to provide additional officers in our bigger schools, like our high schools, and especially our alternative schools, to make sure that we have enough representation in those type schools. And then also, one of the new things that we're doing or updating is technology. Technology is just a huge way to leverage when you don't have all the people you need. And so we're upgrading all of our technology. I can tell you kind of what we're moving to if you just email me directly. And then we're still in collaboration with all of our key law enforcement, fire rescue folks, our criminal justice commission, mental health professionals, police and fire chiefs, school specialists throughout the state of Florida. Our police chief is Frank Kitzrow. He was the Jupiter Police Department, but not only was he that, he came from Virginia, and he was a police department chief during the DC sniper incident and all that. So we have an extremely experienced police chief that is passionate about what he does. And so he is basically in a very short period of time, zero-based our police department, along with the recommendations we got from the Council of the Great City Schools. And then when you talk about teaming up, who needs to be on the team? Literally everybody needs to be on the team. We've had tremendous input from our community members, community engagement, our local municipalities. So it has to be a team effort when you're talking about security for our students. And then a crisis response plan. It is so important that you have a collaborative approach to your crisis response plan. We also had to change how I'm from Texas, as I said before, and I love football. And so we had to change how we did our football games. We went to a see-through backpack. You can't take a purse in. You can't, it was just a huge, huge culture shift for Palm Beach County schools. Our schools are built open. They're built tropical, if you've ever been to Florida. And so to try to enclose them, to try to create the single point of entry, that has been a challenge. And we have laid more fence, I think, than they've ever laid in the history of Palm Beach County in these short few months. So again, a complete culture shift. And then, as you can see some of the steps on the crisis response plan, again, that is so critical that you have a way to respond to the community. And then the communication plan, again, if you're in the military, it's high speed, low drag. That means that our communication plan that we have in Palm Beach County is unparalleled. Our chief of staff, chief of communication, Amity Scholar, is probably one of the most brilliant people I've ever worked with. So if you want further information, I can give me your email. I can let you talk to her directly if you're struggling with this. And then our emergency management center. We really didn't have one. I came from Dallas ISD, and we had a very wonderful chief of police, Craig Miller. And so he had a management center. When I got to Palm Beach County, we didn't have one. I'm like, what's going on? And so we're in the process of building one. Inside an existing structure. We're not building a whole center, but inside an existing structure. So we're in that process right now. And it gives us real-time incident management. It brings everyone together. It lets everyone know what's happening in a single push of a button. So that's what technology can do for you. And then key elements for the school's police safety plan. It's extensive, but I would tell you if you skip a step, you're already in trouble. So I think this is uploaded on the forum's website if you want to look at some of this. I won't go through every one of them. And what is safety? I am safety. Safety planning is essential. It's an investment. You have to take an active role in it. It just doesn't happen overnight. You have to make the commitment on the front end. The commitment is personnel and money. You know, you can't do it unless you have both. It's a collaborative process, so we figured out early on that it's not something you can do in a little room. You have to bring everybody to the table. And train and share your plan with key stakeholders, what you're able to provide. Oftentimes, I'm having to say that I can't tell you that because it compromises our security, but this is what I can tell you. And so we've had a lot of those conversations. Model the way and hold others accountable. This is a big issue with our chief of police, Frank Kitzerow. He's going to model good behavior, and he's going to hold you accountable for it. So, again, we're zero-based in our police department. So this is so important that you do these kind of things. Trust your instincts. In crisis, it's better to do something than do nothing. So you have to trust your gut, I guess is what he's trying to say. Trust your gut. And again, we can build a culture of safety throughout the organization. We're in this process, as well as a lot of other school districts, building a culture of safety. You can't just take it for granted anymore. It's not how it was when we went to school. So we have to recognize it, keep it out in front of us, and not get so complacent. You know, this is something that you have to work at every single day. Ultimate goal is to make every day a safe school day. So, you know, again, our chief of police, as well as our executive leadership team, as well as our teachers, as well as our community, we're living this right now. I can't tell you how many emails I get, I saw this. And that's really what it takes. A lot of the things that happen with kids in school, they tell someone. So we get a lot of our information from kids because we're like, they're taking an active role in keeping themselves safe. So what I would tell you is that this is a iterative process. You have to stay committed to it every single day. And you have to fight for what you need to keep our kids safe. You know, and again, it's relentless. It's relentless. And so it's kind of a Debbie Downer kind of conversation, but it's a necessary conversation. And I want to thank you all for listening to me and bringing this information forward. And go Longhorns, because I am a Longhorn. Thank you very much.
Wanda, Paul, thank you very much. Part 2 of our Advancing School Safety and Security, we have an architect's perspective, staff architect from Arizona School Facilities Board in Phoenix. Please welcome Dan Demland.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to start off by saying you won't see slides here. Why? When we talk school security, we've got to start thinking beyond what we've seen. Hasn't worked. It's been successful, but hasn't worked. And so I don't want to put ideas up there that come from my head that goes to yours, because you have schools and districts that you have to be responsible for, and every approach is going to be different. 2 schools 2 miles apart may not have the same plans. Don't worry about it. I worked for the governor. Basically, my executive director is a cabinet-level position, and I account directly to him. I work 7 floors below the governor of the state of Arizona. If you come see me, let me explain to you what you have to do. You strip down to your skivvies. You know all about Kari. When you get through the metal detectors, the x-ray machines, and everything else, and you're putting your clothes back together, I ask everyone, stop and think for one moment. Take the absolute most deepest look in your heart at that very second. What do you feel? Probably insecurity. Because what we've just implanted in you subconsciously is this place can't be secure, because if it was, you wouldn't need this. Now let's take that to our schools, to small children, young adults. We do the same thing. Have we set an environment that they're comfortable in? One that we can maximize their learning in? I'm going to guess not. How much does that affect the learning environment? My take is substantial, and none of it measurable because it's all subconscious. When I ask you about school security and the biggest threats, what are the things that come to your mind? Active shooter, we've heard that a lot. What about natural disasters? They're just as big. Probably happen more often, yet we don't think about those. Hazardous materials. Who has chemicals on your campuses? Let me explain to you, it's a matter of time before one of them spill. What's your game plan? What do we deal with that? How do we deal with that? If I told you the most corrosive chemical on a school campus was water, you wouldn't believe me, but let me explain to you it is. It's the most corrosive chemical we know. We don't think about it because if we didn't drink it, we wouldn't live. Bullies. How many of you can say your campuses have no bullies? These are the threats that we're talking about. The two most important threats faced on every campus today, more than any other thing, custodial interference, wrong parent picking up a child, and bullying. I didn't see guns in either one of them. Typically, we don't. But that's what we think about. I want to talk about myths when it comes to security. Fact, $1 of prevention saves $4 in mitigation. I have a fiduciary responsibility to my taxpayers to spend money wisely. Where is it better spent? Waiting till an event or maybe anticipating it? Fiction takes a lot of these for school security. Notice I said fiction. Some of the simplest things that we can do is done in the front office. You walk in, how many of your schools, there's a sign-in book, and I get to sign in my name. And you give me my sticker, and I walk away. Paul Tim, one of the most recognized national school security experts, just a couple weeks ago sat there, he says, I've never signed in my name. He says, I signed Michael Jordan. I've even signed in Beyonce. No one says anything. I shouldn't have to sign it in. I give it to your person at the desk. They take my ID, they sign it in. Oh, by the way, when you come back, we'll give you your ID. Why? If something happens, we know where you live. I've got the information to find you if you're the wrong parent. Fact, most school shootings have less than 10 victims. Almost all have less than 10 victims. Fiction, an armed stranger is the greatest threat on our campus. How many school shootings have we heard of, do you know of, in the last, let's say, 10 years, where the shooter gained access through force, forcibly breached the campus? Can anyone tell me? How many? One. Sandy Hook. The highest ability to control security is entrance prohibition for the bad guys. But in almost all these shootings, all these incidents that we see, they're people who belong on the campus. Entrance prohibition is not even an option to us. If they belong on the campus, I can't prohibit them to be there, so we've got to think different. Think different. Think outside what we've been seeing. Fact, bullying and custodial interference are truly the most important threats to our students on a daily basis. The key, we call them in Arizona, every state calls them different, ERPs, Emergency Response Plan. We have to understand what we have to put in those. Now, a lot of school districts will sit there and say, well, we've had something developed. Have you? I've walked into administration offices and I've asked for the ERPs because that's one of the jobs I've got when I go inspect. And I say, where is it? Well, first of all, if they can find it, it's in a 4-inch binder on a shelf and it's got 2 inches of dust. Are we seeing the picture or do I need to be more explicit? It's too complex and no one's seen it. If you don't train it, you don't learn it, you don't practice it, it's useless on the day of the emergency. An ERP should only be 5, 6, 7 pages. I'm an old baseball coach. Let me tell you how much I help the team. That's how much. I sit in the dugout. I can't tell them what to do. You tell your athletes the fundamentals, you give them a game plan, and then you give them the authority to go execute it. We have to do the same thing with our teachers and staff in schools. I can't give them a 4-inch binder and expect them to understand what's going on and to remember it, because when the shooting starts, they're not going to be grabbing the damn book. Would you? I got my Colorado contingent here, and I've talked to a couple of you. Up in Colorado, there's a group called the I Love You Guys Foundation, started by John Michael Keyes. His daughter was the only victim, along with the shooter, killed at the Plate Canyon High School shooting, 2006, I think. I know John Michael, got a chance to meet him. I've worked with him heavily. His group has created what they call the SRP, the Standard Response Protocol. I've got a notebook down here. I could hold it up and show it to you. It's a few pages, downloaded free. Start there. We don't have to recreate the wheel. They've already done it, and they've gained national accolades for it. Last I heard, about 85–90% of your schools have it. Is that about right? I'm working on moving them to Arizona. I think it's a great program. Along with that, we need to understand these ERPs have to contain certain information. Command center. An event occurs, let's find a place where everyone's going to be. Who's ever in charge from the school, who's ever in charge from EMS, where are they going to set up the trucks? Where are they going to set the response units? Oh, by the way, make sure you have 2 sites, because what happens if where you picked your site for this school is where the event occurred? Might not hurt to have 3. Where's the media going to be when you have an event? Have you asked that to your schools? Let me tell you where I'd like them to be, about 1 mile, 3 miles away, 10 miles away. The farther, the better. Do you really want a microphone stuck in the face of an 8-year-old traumatized kid? So let's put them there. Reunification. The most important thing that we do as districts is, how do we reunify? I got another solution. Let's go back to the I Love You Guys. Their SRM. Standard Reunification Method. Don't reinvent the wheel. Find it out. The book, you come see me, I've got the book right there. You can download it free of charge. It's up to you as a school district to implement it. If I use the term CPTED, can anyone tell me what I'm talking about? Anyone here heard it? What is it? Oh, by the way, I'm an architect. You should have figured design had to come out of that. We've talked about Sandy Hook. When they designed the new Sandy Hook building, the community did not want the building to be built exactly where the old school was, so they built it back. Well, when you do that, I have to build the building pad up because of flooding reasons. And what they did is that they had to get the dirt somewhere, so the architect created this dry moat. Vehicle, pedestrian, unfriendly. There is one path to the school now, and you can see it from 15 different vantage points. and you have to walk a long ways to get there. It's about territorial reinforcement. It's about allowing us to see out, which has to be balanced with the bad guys being able to see in. Most of the myths we've heard where these shooters have made recon and know the school campuses, let me explain to you, I haven't seen it happen in any of the data I've looked at. There are people who might know something about it, but more than likely, we give it away. Sandy Hook, when the shooter came to the front door, there were glass windows everywhere. He knew exactly how to breach and get in. He didn't have to know the school. When I talk about bulletproof windows, how many people think that it's going to stop bullets? Well, you're partially right. Let me tell you what you don't know. Underwriters Laboratory, who sets the standard, U752, sets a standard for the different glazing levels for different bullet types, from 1 to 10. Typically, in most schools, we would want to look at levels 3 to 4 is what we're looking at, which goes in at about $60 to $75 a square foot. On the third bullet, we risk breach of window. I'm paying an awful lot of money considering that the forced breach at Sandy Hook took 8 bullets. I guarantee you that ballistic glass wouldn't have lasted. But I can put a hurricane film on, and for those of you around Texas in the southeast, you know what hurricane film is. It's that neat little stuff we put behind the windows to reinforce it so that when the 2x4 from the construction site halfway down the street doesn't go through our window. $7 a square foot. And it will keep the bad guy from entering for 1.5 minutes or more. When time is of the essence, that's the barrier we want. I want us to talk, and I only have a few minutes, but to close, I want to talk a little bit about one of the reasons why I don't have slides. We've got to come up with new ideas. Some of those new ideas. Look up Roxbury, Massachusetts on the internet. There was a career-killing school, and everyone here knows what that means. It was the worst school in the district. And this new principal came in about 2 years before Sandy Hook, and they had dark walls. Spent $100,000 a year in school security, metal detectors and guards. He got rid of it all, put it into the school in the arts program. 2 years later, it's top performing in the region. Those walls that were dark and gray with no projects on are alive and vibrant. Why? Because peer pressure. See, Bubba, the football captain, and 2 of his buddies, when the gangbangers start tagging these walls, they go have a visit and say, hey, we just want to remind you, this isn't your school, this is our school, and we don't do this on our campus. The community's bought in. All this stuff is bought in. It's vitally important we understand. And I get into this in some articles I wrote. I've wrote a 5-part article series. And I would like you all, when you get a chance, if you can go to the small group discussion, I have some copies of many of those articles in a book that I can give you if you would like. And if we run out, I've got electronic copies. But there's data here for us to understand. These out-of-the-box thinking. There's another group, Oak Hills High School, suburb of Cleveland. The principal there got a K9 unit. Now, we all know that these dogs they're very good at what they do. But let's just say they don't have the nicest dispositions. If you've ever been around a K9 unit, you know what I mean. But there's 2 groups in the country that take these puppies when they are ready as very, very little dogs. They find them to be more social, and they train them to do it, just to put them on campuses. And they did that in Oak Hills High School, and it's amazing the results of that. Just a couple weeks ago, thanks to Kari and his group, did a seminar up in Phoenix, and all of a sudden, I'm introduced to a new type of dogs on campus, therapy dogs. We've all talked about the mental health, but we don't realize that these therapy dogs have the very same ability to recognize these kids. And if I have these therapy dogs on elementary and middle school campuses, what happens to the train? We find these children at this age, and they end up never, ever going down that path. They don't become the news that we hear. There's a system called GEOS, G-E-O-S. They're out of Houston, Texas. Wanda, just from your hometown. A school district can go into it. We all have these neat little things. I couldn't carry mine up because apparently the mic and my phone doesn't get along. But we all have these smartphones. A couple of the key survivors to Virginia Tech was the fact that the one girl had her phone open to 911, laid it under her head with her hair over it so they could get vital recon information on the shooter. And this does the same thing. See, these are the things I want us to talk about. And I'm looking forward to the discussion group. I'd like to see many of you come over so we can start to talk about it. But I don't want you to think that I have all the answers or all the ideas. I'm just an architect. I'm a facilities specialist. I got into security after Sandy Hook, and when we get over there, I'll tell you a little more about that story. But I need you to understand security is multifaceted. It takes buy-in from all levels, from the local community to the students to the staff to the PTA, PTO, depending where you are, whatever. And we have to get that buy-in. And when we do, we start to see things happen. That's the takeaway I want everyone from here to know. You can be that catalyst. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan, for that very educational presentation. We have a few minutes for Q&A for both presenters. Wanda, if you don't mind coming back up on the stage and joining Dan, we can take some questions from presenters.
Thank you all for your presentation. What do you think the need is for the police, sheriff, whatsoever, be a part of the design process when you're designing new schools? Do you think that's necessary? Have you seen that done? Where are we with that right now?
The way the state of Arizona is set up, the school districts actually hold the contracts and everything. We have minimum guidelines, which are woefully lax. But bringing the EMS in during design, I'm a big fan of. I don't have a problem with it. In fact, the law enforcement people will see things that we typically don't. When we design a campus, the solution to that is to think of an onion. And how is an onion? Anyone who's cooked knows. It's layer after layer after layer. And we can bring the design the same way, but having police and by the way, most jurisdictions have at least fire look at it, but I'm a big advocate, go ahead and have the law enforcement look at it as well. I think it's a very good step to take, but we don't have the authority, at least in Arizona, for me to dictate to it, but I do encourage, look, 2 heads are better than 1 and 10 are unstoppable. The more people we have involved, the more people that we deal with, the more answers, the better solutions we get at a better delivery price. And unfortunately, my decision makers, my political decision makers, only care about the dollars.
Comment for one of y'all and a question for another, okay? And I'm just going to say, I want to second what we're doing. We're adopting the I Love You guys. We got a chance to hear John Michael, and particularly if you're in a district where there's more than one district in a county, you can't afford not to do this because you got 4 different ERP sets and 1 set of first responders in a lot of cases, EMS. So get it. It's all free.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Where are you from?
I'm from Rock Hill Schools, and we actually just use the SRM to do a whole district, every employee reunification exercise capped by an address from Michelle Gay from Safe and Sound Schools. She was a mom in Sandy Hook, lost her daughter Josephine. I think she actually mentioned your name in her talk. But getiloveyouguys.com. The U is like you, because that's what she texted right before she was shot.
My hat off to you. It's a great program.
Second question is, ma'am, when you're doing your compliance with the new law, Are the contributions, the 10 sheriff's deputies and the other contributions from the municipalities counting towards the 75 officer new requirement under the law?
No, it's totally separate. So the officers, the municipalities, and the 10 sheriff deputies, that's just a stopgap measure until we get to our full numbers.
And the only follow-on comment was, it seems like y'all began the process even before Marjorie Stoneman with a lot more officers per student population than a lot of us have. I'm doing the math, and I think you're going down towards less than 1,000 students per officer or vice versa, which is phenomenal, I guess. I wish we could follow in your footsteps.
I think we're just very fortunate in one way, in that as a school district in Florida, this is my second experience with having the police department report to me, that having your own police department has a certain level of comfort, not only for me personally as a COO, but also for our community. The advantage we had also is that even though we have separate municipalities that are helping us, they've always been in our schools. The sheriff's department has always been engaged in our schools. So it wasn't like they were just seeing officers for the first time, these officers for the first time. So we've been very blessed in the sense that we were able to respond. And I just feel really bad for those school districts that are having to build from the bottom up and not having a police force, and then having to enter into contracts and so forth. For us, it was just a tremendously short period of time. And we knew that it would be unforgivable not to have an officer in every school the first day of school. That was just a non-starter for us. We had no choice. That's what the community demanded, and that's what we demanded of ourselves.
Have any of the school districts in the area considered walk-through metal detectors?
That's a really interesting question. Again, I've spent some time in several other districts, and my experience with metal detectors, even if you have a metal detector, you still need that person standing by the metal detector. So it's personnel intensive. And then in some experiences I've had where I've gone to schools, not in Palm Beach County, but in other districts where the metal detector was unplugged. And people just walked around it and so forth. So, metal detectors is not this magic piece of equipment that's going to cure all. And so in our district, we've taken a stance that we're not going to have metal detectors.
Unfortunately, we are out of time to stay on schedule. So any more questions that you all have, I encourage you to attend Dan's breakout session following the next 75-minute block of business strategy meetings. I want to thank you both sincerely, Wanda and Dan, so much for being with us here today to address the most paramount and chief important topic that we all deal with on a daily basis. Thank you so much.